fear etched on their faces, forced to unfurl a black flag bearing an Islamic phrase.
We don't know whether this is politically motivated, although obviously there are some indications that it could be.
6 agonising hours later, 3 hostages escape. 2 men darting out the door towards police. Seconds later, a third man, an apparent cafe employee wearing a brown apron, joins them. And then over an hour later, 2 women escape. The panic on their faces telling it all.
When we saw that rush of escapees, we could see from up here at this vantage point, the gunman got extremely agitated as he realised those 5 had got out. He started screaming orders at the people inside. The hostages remained behind.
Now, we just want to tell our viewers exactly where this cafe is located. It is in the heart of the city, in the CBD. The US consulate very close. The Reserve Bank of Australia, as is the 7 Network, which you heard the reporter there, across the road. So clearly this gunman choosing this location specifically so that he could get maximum coverage.
They are being strongly supported by Commonwealth agencies. We don't yet know the motivation of the perpetrator. We don't know whether this is politically motivated, although obviously there are some indications that it could be. We have to appreciate that even in a society such as ours, there are people who would wish to do us harm. That's why we have police and security organisations of the utmost professionalism that are ready and able to respond to a whole range of situations and contingencies, including the situation that we are now seeing in Sydney. The whole point of politically motivated violence is to scare people out of being themselves. Australia is a peaceful, open and generous society. Nothing should ever change that, and that's why I would urge all Australians today to go about their business as usual. Of course, if anyone does have any suspicions of untoward activity, there is the National Security Hotline, 1800 123 400, which I would urge them to call. I can let you know that the National Security Committee of the Cabinet has been briefed on this incident. I've been in regular contact with Premier Baird over the course of the last couple of hours. I've been briefed by Commissioner Scipione of the New South Wales Police and by Commissioner Colvin of the Australian Federal Police. This is an unfolding situation, and as the situation unfolds, there will be operational updates provided by the New South Wales Police. I want to assure people that the ordinary business of government must go on, and it will go on, and that's why Treasurer Hockey and Finance Minister Cormann will shortly be releasing the mid-year economic and fiscal outlook as planned. Finally, this is a very disturbing incident. I can understand the concerns and anxieties of the Australian people at a time like this, but our thoughts and prayers must above all go out to the individuals who are caught up in this. I can think of almost nothing more distressing, more terrifying than to be caught up in such a situation, and our hearts go out to those people. Look, I'm going to leave it to the New South Wales Police, who are in operational charge of this incident, to provide those kinds of details. Obviously, in a situation like this, all sorts of reports fly around, all sorts of claims are made, so I do urge everyone to exercise caution in their reporting, but I will leave all of the operational details to the New South Wales Police who, as I understand it, will begin providing operational updates shortly. Thank you.
The Australian Prime Minister describing the situation there down in Sydney, Australia as terrifying, scary. And as he was talking, we got the news that there's another situation going on like this in Ghent, Belgium, not too far from here. And we're going to check it out later. Maybe we'll come back with it with Hoeksteen live streams. Maybe not, if we can find anything. But let's first check out how the flight system, the airplanes in Europe are doing. Is this situation in Ghent making any impact on the flights in Europe, or is flying just as it goes normally? And remember, there's also a strike going on in Belgium. Maybe that will affect also the flying of airplanes in this continent. Let's watch it.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is heading toward a major win in his country's parliamentary elections. According to the exit polls so far, his Liberal Democratic Party is taking around 300 of the 475 seats in the lower house. Mr. Abe called this snap election. Tell us, what appears to be the outcome here?
Well, if you listen to the words of the Prime Minister just seconds ago, Jim, he thanked the Japanese people for securing a victory, a landslide victory for his ruling coalition. And this is all to show that Abe's coalition not only held its majority, but actually gained seats, Jim. So you mentioned earlier if Abe's political gamble paid off, it certainly appears to have done so in a very big way for the Prime Minister.
What does he do with it? What will Shinzo Abe take from what appears to be a mandate? How will he go forward then?
Well, you know, he sold this when he called this snap election as an opportunity for the Japanese people to decide whether they think Abenomics is the right course for Japan's financial future. But let's be realistic here. Let's be honest. The opposition party didn't have another plan. So there was no other plan other than Abenomics presented to Japanese voters. This was a cunning political move. Abe knew, and his insiders knew, that his party held such a large majority that landslide victory was all but guaranteed. What this means, Jim, is 4 more years of the economic policies that Abe and his insiders believe will help revive the Japanese economy after decades, or I should say at least around 2 decades of certainly stagnation and in many years deflation.
What does the election matter to the rest of the world? Why is it important?
It's important for a couple of reasons. Number one, Japan is the world's 3rd largest economy. So what happens here does have financial ripples across the world. It affects the 2nd largest economy, China. It affects the 1st largest economy, the United States, and all of the other countries below these 3 giant economic powers. But there are also
has been saying some extraordinary quotes about North America, about North Korea, about their relationship, and how the way this relationship should evolve. Let's look at it.
Stop.
From what North Korea is telling us, what the mother of Arturo Martinez is telling us, he very much wanted to enter the country, so much so that he tried swimming across the river earlier this year. He didn't make it successfully across, was actually put in a psychiatric hospital in California, got out of that hospital, got a payday loan, returned to Beijing, and then, according to the North Korean government, successfully entered that country illegally back in November, just a couple of days after the U.S. diplomat James Clapper was there, securing the release of two other Americans, Kenneth Bay and Matthew. He said that the billionaires consoling, he says, the American political system are intent on taking over the world. This, of course, music to the ears of the North Korean government and its leadership, which is trying to paint the United States as the bad guy amidst a growing chorus of international claims of human rights abuses.
Yeah, absolutely. And people before Will, since you've been there, you got to go there to try to help other returning. This young man, obviously troubled, was using this situation to speak out and talk about things he's unhappy with. What's next for him?
We don't know what's next for him as far as the situation in North Korea. And he said in his statement he was thankful to the Pyongyang leadership for pardoning him for his crime of entering that country illegally. But when I spoke with my contact via email in North Korea and asked if this man is free to go, if he's being detained, if he's under investigation, I was essentially given no comment. So we don't know his legal status in that country right now. But when you look at the pictures of him, you do see that he's not wearing a prison jumpsuit. He's wearing a suit and tie. He walked into this room on his own, sat in front of the cameras, and in fact thanked the North Korean government for the generous reception they've given him there. Again, very valuable for them to have an American citizen saying the things that he's saying, because that they can then broadcast to their own people and to the rest of the world to make their case against the United States.
You spoke of his mother on his initial statement. Do we know anything more about
Well, we know, as his mother said, that he grew up in El Paso, Texas, along the U.S.-Mexico border, an area ravaged by drug violence. He actually referred to and blamed the U.S. government on that as well. She says that he's 29 years old, very smart, working with computers, and wanted to help the world. That's what she said. So perhaps he felt that by crossing into North Korea and sending this message, perhaps he's helping the world in some way. But you have to wonder now really what his motivations are and where he goes from here. Does he return to the United States? We are told that he apparently is seeking asylum in Venezuela, giving an indication he doesn't want to go back to America after his actions in North Korea.
All right, a bizarre case to be sure. We'll look for us out of Tokyo. Thank you, Will.
You're still watching the daily updates from the Hoeksteen Live. We bring you the news as it happens. We bring you the feeds, we bring you the news, the information, weather, financial information, culture, everything. And now we're going to try to go back to the situation in Sydney, Australia, and one of our TV stations. There he is.
Under wraps, they do know who he is. They are familiar with who he is as a result of finding out his identity. So the question is, what's going on there, and how can they bring this to an end? Let's bring in the FBI's former lead international kidnapping negotiator, Chris Voss, and Fran Townsend, CNN national security analyst and former Bush Homeland Security and counterterrorism advisor. Couldn't have two better people to discuss this. Let's deal with the specific. Chris, let me bring you in here. How do you handle a guy like this? Chris is on the phone right now. So what do you think they're doing? How is this working right now?
Yeah, good morning, Chris. Thanks for having me on. If I may, let me take you behind the scenes a little bit on this. The hostages go so that they can find out how they can resolve this peacefully. One of the things that I've heard that concern me a little bit is that if he's not talking directly to the negotiators, if he's communicating only through hostages, that's a little bit of a problem for them, because he's then making a conscious effort to not talk directly with them. He's trying to keep a psychological barrier between himself and the negotiators. So they'll be doing whatever they can to see how they can get him out of there alive.
Now, what does it mean to you, Chris, that in these videos that he's released of the hostages, we haven't shown the videos, we understand they're being taken off YouTube, so we don't know what that'll mean in his head in terms of how seriously he's being taken. But he seems to be wondering, he calls himself the brother, and he keeps wondering why his demands aren't being met. What do you do with that type of expectation from someone deranged like this?
Well, the negotiators will talk to him, and they'll tell them that those sorts of things are out of his control. If the primary thing that he's seeking is simply attention, they can give him that and ideally satisfy what he's after so that they can get everyone out of there alive. So they really have to understand exactly what it is that he's after, and whether or not something intangible can be used to satisfy his psychological need for attention.
All right, let me bring in Fran right now in terms of, well, who is this guy? They know who he is. They say they're familiar with him from the Muslim community there, but they're not giving us any more detail, and obviously they want their operational security. They should have it. But in terms of assessing whether this is the lone wolf, this is a crazy person, or this is part of something more, what do you see?
Well, the fact that they know who he is, Chris, means that they're looking at whether or not he's part of a larger network. Remember, the Australians, a very capable intelligence and security service, made arrests in the last 3 months of a group that said they were going to grab a civilian off the street for a beheading. And no doubt the first order of business is to figure out, is he connected to the group that had that plot? That's also going to tell them whether or not they think the threat is credible. He's mentioned 3 locations in downtown Sydney where there may be, he claims to have planted explosive devices. What they know about him and whether he's connected to that group will again tell them whether that's a credible threat or not.
He says he's working with other operatives. We know he has access to cell phones, and yet he uses one of these hostage videos to say we're trying to communicate to the other brothers not to detonate the bombs. That seems to not be reasonable. Like, he should have other ways to contact them. Is that the kind of thing that will figure into your thinking?
Absolutely, but on the other hand, Chris, you could read it just almost 180 degrees out, right? By not calling them himself, by not communicating himself and using other people's cell phones, maybe an indication of operational security, that he doesn't want to use his own phone because he thinks it's less likely that theirs are being tapped.
A reporter saw him walking with an iPad. Again, it's dark, the lights are off. He's turned the lights off inside this cafe, and it's now midnight plus there in Australia. Chris Voss, let me go back to you. We do understand that these videos that have been taken down have now been reposted under another person who may or may not be held captive in there right now. What does that mean to you if he is so insistent on using social media?
Well, they're going to have to factor that into whatever communication that he's giving them inside. If that's his endpoint, that he wants to get this out on social media, that could actually possibly be a bad sign. So it's going to have to be connected to what he's saying and what they appear his goals to be. It's completely driven by the context of how he's communicating and what their sense of is whether or not he's trying to orchestrate this to a specific conclusion.
Chris, what is the significance of time? How does 6 hours versus 12 hours and now moving into past that figure into strategy and expectations?
Well, Chris, yeah, that's a great question, because he's going to be running out of gas before long. Usually in these type of sieges, a person by themselves, at about the 12-hour mark, they start to become psychologically overwhelmed by trying to manage the entirety of this siege. Too tired. They almost become psychotic. So he doesn't have a lot of energy left, and they're going to have to decide how that also plays into the content of his communications.
We do know they've brought food in and some provisions for the people inside. Presumably he has access to that as well. Chris Voss, thank you very much. We'll be checking back in with you this morning as we learn more information so you can give us some understanding. Friend Townsend, appreciate it. Allison?
All right, Chris, thanks so much. We'll have continuing coverage of the siege in Sydney.